Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another round of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5 as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC. That is, of course, iRacing. And tonight we mark round 11 of the 13 round calendar that keeps us all guessing who will be our championship winners in the Drivers' Championship and within the Teams' Championship round after round with the absolutely thrilling action. And you can only find it in one place. It's the closest possible resemblance to real-world motorsport in touring car racing class action. Indeed, if you're a major fan of British Touring Car Championship all the way through to the American Touring Car Racing Challenge out of the United States, this is the place that's closely replicating what happens in real life on the premier sim racing platform of iRacing. And tonight, with our drivers making their way back to another classical American venue, the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Racing Course, it is the case our schedule for tonight is in the following times: British Summer Time and Universal Coordinated Time +1. It is as follows. It will be the case in just under 14 minutes we'll be going to racing with our qualifying session, while our drivers will have 15 minutes to put in their best possible laps, of course, to determine their placement on the grid for our one and only race on the schedule. For, of course, last week we marked the conclusion of all of our sprint race rounds, and today it's going to be a feature race, 60 minutes of racing action with a mandatory pit stop thrown in there for good measure, and come the end of it through measuring their pace and at the same time looking to deliver on the strategy who will be our victor when they cross the line after 60 minutes, with that feature race following immediately after qualifying at approximately 8 o'clock this evening. Now, this broadcast is, of course, being brought to you as a post-round broadcast where all the racing action occurred as of the previous Monday. So, for context, the racing action occurred on Monday, the 26th of September, what we're bringing you to you as if it were live for your viewing pleasure. And so, if you are tuning in as well, the drivers who raced in this race earlier on in the week, we do ask that you avoid spoilers wherever possible, of course, for those guys and girls tuning in at home who are uninitiated and indeed do not know the outcome and do not want it spoiled for them. And indeed, as your host and commentator, I do not know what happens. I have kept myself under an embargo where there's been no spoilers throughout, and therefore it'll be the case that for me, I'm not to know who's been able to do well in practice, who's come out on top in qualifying, indeed who takes the checkered flag in the race. Who am I? Well, I am Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Brit the Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and I'll be bringing you all your racing action tonight and for the remainder of the series. Indeed, what a journey it has been, and all the racing action is being brought to you via two media platforms for your viewing pleasure. Firstly, if you are a YouTube user, you can go to youtube.com and search for Paul Walsh, alternatively TX141TX, or if you want to go to Twitch, if you're more so inclined to use the twitch.tv platform service, you can always go to twitch.tv/TX141 and tune in there. And if you are in the chat, don't be shy, feel free to say hi. We can see both the YouTube and the Twitch chats, and we'll interact with you guys and girls as much as humanly possible. But indeed, what a season it has been so far, and as we continue to head towards the season finale, well, let's take a look at that schedule and what lies ahead. Of course, today we are at Mid-Ohio. The racing having occurred on the 26th of September, and as of tomorrow, then it will be round number 12 of the racing takes place on the 3rd of October at Watkins Glen, and the season finale awaits on the 10th of October at the Road Atlanta circuit. And you can see now, in terms of our colours for our remaining rounds, we've got two blue rounds, which are Alpha rounds, or the 60-minute feature race rounds, and then we've got the Road Atlanta Special, and that's in purple pink. That is the special round on the 10th of October, and we're still waiting for the finalisation of what exactly that round is going to entail for our season finale. But on the way there, of course, we've gone for a whole plethora of rounds, and whilst the emphasis now is really on the United States of America in terms of our choice of circuit, let's not forget the fact that we started off in the United States of America at the Belle Isle circuit all the way back on the 11th of July. That's where we kicked it off at the circuit located in the city of Detroit, and what a fantastic season opener we had there for our first Alpha round, where the action came fast and furious amongst the streets. Indeed, many a driver having to keep it out of the wall and plenty of battling action. It was then Laguna Seca in the state of California on the 18th of July in Monterey County. Indeed, under the bespectacled sun, we saw our opening sprint race round of the season, where we had our three sprint races there, really kick off and set the tempo for the fast and furious and shorthand action of the sprints. And then we made our way across the Pacific Ocean to Fuji Speedway in Japan for our second Alpha round, where on the 25th of July we saw a complete mix-up in the field across both the Alpha and the Delta classes, or our Pro and our Pro-Am classes, and at Fuji Speedway Speedway, we saw new winners come about. Then we made our way to the United Kingdom for the Alton Park circuit, the classical circuit for touring car racing. At Alton Park, we saw plenty of knocks and bangs. Indeed, Alton Park is no stranger to close-knit racing action and plenty of elbows out and instants before they're making our way to Monza, staying within Europe for a good period of time there. And at the Monza circuit, it was fast, it was furious. It lacked a collision on turn number 1, and indeed lap number 1, but lap number 2 was full of drama there at the Monza circuit on the 8th of August. And after that, our drivers were licking their wounds before making their way to the Austrian circuit at the Red Bull Ring. Now, of course, there was a big quandary at the Red Bull Ring because of the fact it was the national layout, and our drivers were wondering, well, why are we using the national layout when we could not be using the full Grand Prix layout? Well, their fears were subsided very quickly in the fact that the Red Bull Ring on the 15th of August, I'm going to put it out there, for our sprint race rounds, probably the strongest of the sprint race rounds. To be fair, all of the sprint race rounds, even last time out at Mosport, were absolutely full of thrilling action. But if you want to see a 6 wide into turn 1 at the Red Bull Ring and all of our drivers survive, then you need to go back and tune into exactly what happened there. And of course, all of that available on Twitch and also the YouTube channel as part of an archive. Then we made our way back to Italy for the Imola circuit on the 22nd of August, where there we had a lower number of drivers in participation, but still plenty of quality racing action. And then we concluded the European Tour on the 29th of August back at Donington Park for another spread of sprint races. We then made our way to the South American continent for Interlagos to conclude the first part of the season, or the first half if you will, which was around number 9. And then last time out we returned after the mid-season break back on the 19th of September for the Canadian circuit, known in full as the Canadian Tire Motorsports Pot, or Mosport in short, where we wrapped up our final sprint race round of the season. And there we saw 3 races which were full of battle in action. Indeed, plenty of contention with regards to the Alpha Championship in particular, less so in the Delta Championship, where we had a very limited Delta field take to the circuit, but still great battles within the Delta class drivers who took part. But it was in the Alphas where we saw a huge mix-up in fortunes, and really that has set the tone for what is the now final 3 rounds on that calendar. But moving from our calendar to our circuit for today, it is of course the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, as it's known in full, located near the town of Lexington in the Troy Township in Morrow County of the state of Ohio in the United States of America. This circuit is one of the classics of American road racing. Now, it doesn't quite have an affectionate nickname like Watkins Glen does in the state of New York, known as the Glen, but Mid-Ohio is known as one of circuits which haven't played host now to American road racing for 60 years as of this year. 6-0, the big 6-0, that's a huge landmark to make. This circuit over the course of the years has seen plenty of renovation, but its core key component has always stayed there, which is that this circuit has a little bit of everything, and it also has a major challenge midway through the lap, known as the S's from turns 4 all the way through to turn 8, also nicknamed previously as the Madness, given the combination of sweeping corners and undulations there. It's almost as if you're going through sand dunes in terms of the way in which the circuit is laid out, and we'll get to see that on board with our drivers in the qualifying session. But as we can see here from the circuit map providers by simracingwiki.com, which only presents things in 2 dimensions, not 3D, this circuit is started off by what is a brilliant run all the way to turn number 1. The run down the start for this straight, we'll see our drivers head up towards top gear when they'll make their way through the fast left-hander of turn 1 before continuing on their journey all the way up to the keyhole hairpin at turn number 2. In turn number 2, it looks like it's going to be a fast hairpin, but it's not. It's the case it's a very tight hairpin, and whilst it's got quite a bit of width on quarter exit, it's all about getting on the power as soon as possible to run their way all the way through the kink of 3 and then into the S's of turns 4 through to 8. Going through the S's, all the madness as they make their way charging through 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. They now have to deal with a whole variety of elevation and undulation changes over the course of those 5 corners, and survive that. They then got the run into Thunder Valley through the right-angled right-hander at turn number 9, where they go over the crest and then down into the valley at turns 10 and 11. And as they merge through 11, they charge up into the carousel at turn 12, and the carousel being a unique corner. Now, normally when you think of carousel, you think of the carousel or the Coca-Cola carousel located at the Nürburgring Nordschleife circuit in Germany, but the carousel here, whilst it's perhaps not as infamous globally, it is the case that the carousel really does mix things up, and the fact there is no one optimum racing line to take through the penultimate corner of the circuit. All our drivers can absolutely hammer it through the corner, and when they emerge through the kink of 13, they go flat out onto the next lap, and that is a lap of the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, as given in a description, a verbal description, but we're going to see it on board very shortly. Now, as for our rules for tonight, let's give you a reminder of the rules. It is the case that in terms of setup, car fuel loads have been restricted to 39 litres for this round, and that mandates a pit stop, of course, for this being an alpha race. There will be a mandatory pit stop in which drivers must take on fuel, but a tyre change is entirely optional, but we have typically seen our drivers go the whole distance of these feature races without needing to take a new set of tyres. Drivers shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 9 or more instant points, and they'll be disqualified from the race if they accumulate 16 or more. The following bonus points are also available. 1 point for pole position, 1 point for fastest lap, 1 point for the Sublime Finesse Award, that's the fewest instance over the round, 1 point for leading a lap at some point in the race, and 1 point for the Naked Aggression Award, which is the most overtakes by a driver over the round. Now, we should clarify that with regards to these bonus points, they are awarded overall. They are not awarded within class, so it is the case whoever takes pole position in the Delta class, if they were to take pole position in their class, so let's imagine, for example, it's Gus Blondell who took that pole position, but they qualified P7 on the overall grid, they would not get the pole position point. Instead, that would go to the overall pole sitter, and you would imagine, based on typical runner form, it has been one of our Alpha drivers. But then again, surprises could come, and you never know what may be around the corner. But with that, that's enough rules, regulations, and everything in between. I know what you're all here for, and indeed, I can see there in the YouTube chat, Travis Fletcher, well, he's being very complimentary about myself, but more a compliment to yourself, Travis, in the fact you're here for the race in action. And indeed, RJ Craigle in the Twitch chat as well, you're here for the race in action and absolutely excited. So let's take you back to the circuit, and indeed, let's see as our drivers make the way on around here. And as we see John Lauzon in particular heading up towards turn number 1, we should point out to you that we are running a new broadcasting microphone today, so the equalization levels and the volume levels may not be what you're used to. So if at any point during this broadcast you feel as though the volume levels are a bit too high, a bit too low, let us know in the chat and we can always fix that accordingly. Of course, we're a change of equipment, we don't necessarily have the time to be able to test it to perfection. We've done some testing earlier on, but we do love to have your feedback from you guys and girls, because you're the guys and girls who make this broadcast what it is when you tune in, and you can recommend these little tidbits in terms of what we can fix and whatnot. But I get the feeling already those audio levels might be a little bit too high, so we are going to just try and make a brief tweak to them in order to be able to stop deafening your ears. And indeed, you'll be able to hear instead the roar of the engines from our drivers as they come charging on around. And of course, these touring car racing class machines, not exactly the fastest out there compared to other machinery that races at the sports car course in mid-Ohio, such as NASCAR, alternatively IMSA, where we're looking more towards GT3 class machinery, but these cars still do pack a punch around the circuit, and Stats would love to tell you about that as well, being in the Delta class there in the Honda Civic Type R, as he makes his way on down and around out of turn number 2 and up towards 3 and 4. But as he comes charging on around, indeed all of our drivers here absolutely itching to deliver tonight. But let's give you a little bit of a recap where things stand in the championship whilst we are waiting with 3 minutes to go in this final warm-up practice session. We'll start in then with, accordingly, our Alpha drivers, or our pros, if you will. We do have a little bit of a point of contention grind in the fact that Francois Shink is on a bit of a high right now after a brilliant performance last time out and really picking up the lion's share of the points at the Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. The Beaver Buzz Energy driver is now closing the deficit to championship leader, what is Robert Abrams, and that gap has come down significantly in the fact the gap now stands at a margin of only 4 points after Robert Abrams really had a day to forget at the Canadian circuit compared to Shink. Excuse me, and now the question is, of course, can Shink continue this momentum all the way through its conclusion, or will it be the case that it goes the other way and we see Robert Abrams deliver? Of course, we do have drop point scores to consider as time wears on. Robert Abrams is in the pit right now. We can't take you over to his car with him being parked up in the pits, but Shink really does seem to be the driver on form, and will he be able to continue that form just a little bit further? Meanwhile, in the Delta class, Connor Achatella continues to lead despite not being in attendance last time out as he makes his way on through then into the pit lane, the privateer in the 55 car, but he is leading by a margin of 119 points and very comfortably ahead of the likes of Gus Blondell and also at Daniel Sedano, both of them on equal points in what is effectively P2 within the class, albeit it is Sedano ahead of Blondell based on result countback. Now you can see Blondell in the Blue Flag Motorsports Elantra making his way through the kink of 3, but where is, by converse, where's Daniel Sedano, where he is currently in the pit lane, and you can also see there the Blue Flag Motorsports driver parked on up. But let's not count out the fact that you do have Eric Statzer, who is only 30 points behind the pair, running in what is effectively P4 in the class, and therefore you can imagine it's all up for grabs in terms of that battle for P2. We do believe that at this point in time, Achatella already has one hand on the Delta crown for this season. Of course, a new class in the championship going into this season. It's the first time in the Alpha Touring Challenge that we've included a Pro-Am class, or an Am class if you will, as part of the Deltas, rather than everybody packed into a single overall championship standing. And that's to open things up and give more for our drivers to play for, particularly if they're not quite on the pace of the pros. Therefore, they've still got something to compete for, and indeed also adds a little bit of inspiration to them. Every time they're able to take an overall position off a pro driver, that just gives them a little bit of a feather in their cap, or a little bit extra motivation to know that they're growing as a driver. And indeed, we've seen seen all of our deltas really grow over the course of the season. Agitella, the most has grown in terms of his pace, has really just gone beyond expectations, and he's been right up there battling with the Alphas from the outset. But the likes of Eric Statzer and also Dom Savio, Daniel Sedino, in fact, all of them who have been participating have been taking the fight to our Alpha drivers and have really been enjoying the fight in there. Is no doubt about that. I can tell you one thing as well, he's not currently in the pit lane, indeed out on the circuit, but we saw him debut last time out on Mosport, and that was Wojciech Swirydowicz, and the Polishman really delivering in terms of his season opening performance at the Mosport circuit. And will he be able to do it again today? He is in attendance, he's set the fastest time in this practice session, but we do need to briefly cut away, ladies and gentlemen, in preparation for qualifying. We'll be right back. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, well, as we return, you're probably wondering, why did we cut away? Well, for the uninitiated, those of you who have not been following us since the season opener, because we are looking at an iRacing replay file, and that's how we're able to bring you all of the racing action back as if it were live. It was the case that early in the season when we went into these qualifying sessions, we'd already have the qualifying results on the left-hand side of your screen. So you can see the time and tower there, it's all blank. Well, it used to be the case that we'd have the qualifying laps that our drivers delivered already there at the start of the qualifying session, and of course that took away the surprise of who would be on pole. Well, we found a way around it, and that's what we had to very quickly implement to make sure all those times were hidden from you. But we can see here, Matthew Shepka making his way up towards his turn number 4 already, and indeed flying out there, the first driver to leave the pit first and foremost. And does that mean potentially here he's looking to go for pole? You never know, given the fact he's come out so quickly from the pit lane here. I think he's all fired up. Now, the runner form we are expecting this circuit has a little bit of everything for all of our different touring car racing class machinery. We don't have any Audi RS3s in attendance today, so we can't really give you a fault on them. Normally the likes of Fernando Takahashi, for example, would be running the Audi RS3, and we do miss seeing the rather unicorn machine making its way out on the circuit. We refer to it as a unicorn because it's so rare by comparison with its peers. But we do have a lot of Hyundais in attendance in terms of the Elantra, less so the Veloster. Then we do have a couple of Honda Civic Type Rs, and speaking of one of them, let's ride on board here with Matthew Shepka as he takes us through the final corner and onto the first flying lap of this qualifying session, and we clear the screen, of course. So as he makes his way up towards turn number 1 into the fast left-hander here, just a left of the throttle and a dab of the brake to settle the car, and rolls his way into turn number 1. Coming on through and now charging full throttle up towards turn number 2 as he heads all the way up towards the hairpin here, in towards the keyhole, looking for his left-hand side there. His brake mark and the 100-meter board being his marker as he heads into corner apex, but he does so very gradually, brings the car in through the right-hander and now exits out and down towards turn number 4 he charges. By going for a late apex, he can get on the throttle nice and early on corner exit, and as he heads down through turn number 3, all the way up towards turn number 4, you'll notice he bringing the car gradually over to the left, giving himself as much width for the entry into turn number 4, but now he goes onto the brakes here at the 100 board, coming down to 3rd gear, nice and tight to the apex, and brings the car immediately over to the right for turn number 5, and this is where the madness begins, because you see he's gone over a hill and now down into a depression before going into the right-hander at turn number 6. As he comes through 6 here, you'll notice he's got to bring the car back over to the right again before pushing it into left-hander at turn 7, over the ridge and down into turn number 8, flat out for 8 before stamping on the anchors here, heading through turn number 9, and now down into the valley he goes as he charges through 9 into 10 and up towards 11, flat out for the right-hander at turn 10 here, and into a blind rise at turn 11, dab of the brake to settle the car, 4th gear. You can see how the rear of the car lifting up already as he goes over the rise and now heading down into the carousel, goes for a late apex here, decides to really try and target getting on the throttle flat out as soon as he taps that throttle pedal, and through the kink of 13 he goes, and Shepka heads the line here, a nice lap to kick off our qualifying session. And what's it going to be as he crosses the line? Well, those times come up on the board there, and we can see it was a 31.743, but already a lot of drives going faster, but everybody hitting it off straight away. And you can imagine that Shepka there might have just been the trailblazer in terms of setting a good lap initially, and now he's going to go all in because, of course, the mantra can be that you can look to do those banker laps where you don't push it too hard, you just make sure you get a good lap on the board, and then you start to up the ante, start to move more and more towards that 100%, starting off at about 90% of your full capabilities. But after the first round of qualifying laps coming on in from the majority of drivers, it does look as though Francois Shink is taking that initial provisional pole by 1.5 tenths of Swirydowicz as they make the way up towards turn number 4 once again. But as they charge on through, let's look to our deltas, and it is Achatella who back fighting fit going into this round after missing out, of course, at Mosport. I think deciding to use that as a drop round at the Canadian circuit. Back here from a more classical American circuit, he's looking fast so far, but he's only 1.5 tenths ahead of Dom Savio. And to be fair to Dom Savio, whilst we haven't seen all of his attendance at every single round, it is the case when he has been in attendance, the number 81 driver has been looking very fast. And you have to look back to Imola, where it was due to a late drive-through penalty that we saw him lose out on a major result at Imola, if my memory's correct. And well, here he'll be looking to try and avoid any drive-throughs and just look to deliver outright, as we see Gus Blondell goes provisional pole in the deltas. And how can you tell who's a delta versus an alpha? Well, you can tell, as we see there, Shepka and Swirydowicz both go up to provisional pole, and it's Swirydowicz who's the second driver across the line, and that means that he retakes a provisional pole after Shepka jumps up to 30.5 versus Swirydowicz's 29.7, which is a huge field away from the rest of the field by 8 tenths there. And well, he is not leaving anything up to chance, absolutely delivering as he heads through turn number 1. And the thing we're saying with regards to Blondell here, he's looking up fast as well. And how can you tell who's a delta and an alpha? That was the key point that we're trying to talk about. Well, you can see on the timing tower there, some of our drivers have a blue stripe next to their name, and some will have a purple stripe next to their name. And those are blue stripe, they're your alphas or your pros. Meanwhile, those are purple stripe are your deltas or your pro-ams. But as we see Blondell making his way up through the madness here, heading through turn at number 6, well, can he potentially take away that pole position from Achatella in the delta class? And I will put my money on Blondell potentially bringing this about, because of the fact we have seen when he's nailing it at the circuit, his pace is not too far off of Achatella, and this circuit is one that is very rewarding to a driver who is fully clocked in with regards to a lap. But I say that, and then look at this. Blondell's teammate of Daniel Sedino from Blue Flag Motorsports, the 710 driver, goes P9 there in a 31.451, albeit running a little bit wide coming out to turn 1, taking a bit too much momentum, and I think that will be classified as an off track there, given all 4 wheels went beyond the white lines, unless I'm mistaken. But Blondell does improve to 31.744. And the gap between Blondell and Sedino only the best part of 3 attempts a second. That time can be found very quickly as tyre temperature continues to go up, and indeed our drivers continue to feel that momentum coming in the car. But meanwhile, looking from them, so drivers a little bit behind them on the timing tower. Here is your current championship leader overall and in the alpha class of Robert Abrams, and well, the number 14 driver really not on a run at the moment. It does feel as though the momentum has gradually fallen away from Abrams over the last 3 to 4 rounds. We did see this momentum start to shift back at Imola in particular, and after Imola it's almost as if the pace that we saw from Abrams, or that ability just to pull the result out of nowhere when he didn't qualify well, Abrams has seemingly just lost that momentum, but at the same time he has been bringing results out the car and salvaging that damage limitation time and time again. But Mosport was really, last time out, Mosport was the first round where we really saw it not go right at all for the championship leader, and here today he's jumped up to P4, he's set a much stronger lap of a 30.6, but looking vulnerable given the fact that his main championship contender or challenger is 6 tenths faster at this time. And well, could it be potentially the car here, given the fact that Shink's in the Elantra versus what is Abrams in the Hyundai Veloster, both of them of course made by the South Korean manufacturer. And I would say there could be a little bit of an element in that. We do know that the Elantra is the fastest of the 1-lap pace cars in this series. We've seen that time and time again, but the Veloster does seem to be the stronger race car, but it has got a lot of pace underneath the hood, and it does deliver when everything is hooked up. So we could just be seeing that Shink may be enjoying the lap here a little bit more, and also being able to apply that 1-lap momentum in the Elantra. And Abrams, if he can carry this up, I think qualifying P4 is not going to leave him too far away from getting a good result. But looking from him to Dom Savio, well, Dom Savio was looking strong in the early part of this qualifying, but as we move into the second half, Oh, how 3 or 4 minutes changes the tide as he heads into what is there, the penultimate corner of the carousel. And as he comes through the long right-hander, what's he going to be able to do this time around? Well, he's only improved in subsector 2 so far, a personal best there. What about subsector 4 as he comes to the line and completes that? He jumps up to P15 with 31.725. But whilst he's trying to find his feet and get his way up the order, I can tell you that whilst there's been a bit of absence, it's now business as usual for Achitilla as he makes his way down towards turn 4. And in the long charge here, the Veloster driver now provisional pole in the Delta class on what is there, a 31.11, and looking strong at the moment. But we look from him to one of our drivers who's about to head onto a lap, and that is Logan McKenzie as he comes on through. And let's ride on board here with the Hyundai Elantra drivers. He gives us a different perspective as he heads into turn number 1. So heading into the long left hander here, you've got to sweep your way through, take a bit of apex curve as well, and as he does, runs a little bit wide and takes the cone with him. But heading down towards turn number 2, the cone won't be feeling anything as he heads up towards the braking zone, in towards the keyhole here, braking as late as he dares into the corner. Will we see a difference in line from the Elantra? He's able to get the nose in much earlier there. Now that's very noticeable compared to Shepka's lap. To be fair, we have to give credit to Shepka. He may have been on slightly cold tyres, given it can take quite a few tyres for these cars to walk. Quite a few laps, I should say, to warm up their tyres. But as he heads down towards turn at number 4, it does look as though McKenzie here having a little bit of an unsettled start to lap, but now he'll try to recompense and make a better lap out of it as he goes a bit deep into turn 4 and brings it into 5. But as he does, I think this is going to be an aborted lap. It just has not been the lap he's wanted as he heads into turn number 6. And as he heads on through the right-hander, bringing the car over slightly to the middle before turning into turn over the rise, and down he goes, exits the madness, and now heading into the valley following turn number 9. And as he rolls his way through the right-hander and now down into the depression, I think he has slightly backed the car off here, given the way the lap has previously gone, as he instead getting himself set up for the next lap as he heads on through turn number 11 into 12. And as he makes his way over the hill and down, we do say hello to Logan McKenzie himself there, saying this track in these cars is always the most physically demanding race on the calendar. We can definitely see why with the number of sweeps and the fact that front end has to go through so many direction changes. And more on that in a brief moment. But McKenzie there only a 32.733, not an improvement. A far cry, and he did have to back off after that mistake at turn number 1, and also that mistake at turn number 4. We went very deep into the corner. We also say hello to John Lauzon there in the YouTube chat. I hope you're doing well, John. And John Lauzon himself as he makes his way on around through turn number 5. Currently in P7 here with just over 4 minutes to go. So to clarify, what is there Logan McKenzie's point in the YouTube chat? Why is this perhaps one of the most physically, if not the most physically demanding circuit on the Season 5 calendar? Well, in these cars, in these touring car racing class cars, we see Lauzon that gets it wrong, but drifts it and brings it back together nicely there at turn number 9. 10 style points for keeping the car together and not letting it drift off circuit. But of course, that is going to be a very heavily flat-spotted pair of rear tyres, and on top of that, that's going to be a jump to the pits. There's no doubt about that. The reason why this circuit is so physically demanding on our drivers is because these touring car racing class machines are front engine, front wheel drive. What does that mean in layman's terms? The front wheels do all the work. The engine puts all the power through the front wheels, and on top of that, what the front wheels by default also do all of the turning. So you put 2 and 2 together, it means that these cars are very prone to understeer for a corner. And when they understeer, that means the car will normally try to go in a straight line when it means to turn into the corner rather than actually making the corner. Add it all together. With this circuit having so many direction changes, particularly through turns 4 through to 8, and also later on that when you've got the carousel, which is that long right-hander, it means that our drivers are constantly having to fight with a front end that does not necessarily want to cooperate. Now, this is an open setup series, which means that our drivers are allowed to make tweaks to the tune of the car. It's not fixed, it's not closed. The only thing they're not allowed to change on the car is the fuel tank they take into the round. Of course, there's a fuel limitation in the car, but beyond that, based on the current balance of performance in iRacing, our drivers can change the setup. That means, in turn, our drivers can tweak as much as they can to try and give the car more front-end rotation. They'll try adjusting the brake bias of the car to put the brake bias towards the rear, to lift up the rear of the car as it goes under braking into a corner to give it more rotation. As you see stats here, getting a nice amount of rotation through turns 8 and 9. And on top of that, you can change the roll bars as well and also modify the rear wing in order to help make the car more attentive to direction changes through the corners. But nailing these corners time and time again, and particularly over a 60-minute race, which you're going to be seeing shortly, that takes gets a huge amount out of a driver and indeed out of the car. You can imagine those front tyres after 60 minutes will be absolutely worn down, and that's why it's such a demanding circuit and why it's the most demanding round on the calendar from a driver's perspective. But as we see stats coming across the line, he improves to 30.778, and that is provisional pole in the Delta class. And I do believe that Acitella's actually gone to the pit, which is so that is going to take him out of contention for taking pole position in the Delta class. It's down between Statsa and Dom Savio now as they make their way through turn number 2. Savio just behind Statsa. And Stats are firing on all cylinders here today. Meanwhile, looking up at the very top of the pile in terms of the time and talent, it's Swirydowicz here, who is currently leading by half a second over Francois Shink, who's gone to the pits, along with James Carr from Breakfast for Dinner and Justin Rhodes, his teammate, iCar's teammate, there in the pits. Robert Abrams is P5 at the moment, but whilst he's heading on down towards turn number 4, there's one driver going very fast as he heads his way to the timeline. And that's a Gus Blonder, who's taken provisional pole in the Delta class. He's gone up to P8 overall, and well, he's going to jump to the pits. He parks up there, and is there going to be a response from Stats, or alternatively Savio at this late hour, or even Daniel Steno, as we can see that Aaron Lahr has jumped up to P13 as he heads into turn number 1. He's going to have one more lap on the clock, but I do believe when we get to that 15-minute timer, the checkered flag will come out and all of our drivers will immediately have to abort their laps. They'll be told, right, it's over, you come to the pits, which, if so, that is really now going to put everything on the bubble, as we see Matt Chepka making his way down through turn number 3 and up towards 4. He's got the draft there as Swirydowicz as he heads up into the right-hander of 4, but I think he's left this very late. Meanwhile, Robert Abrams heading to the timeline, and as he comes on through, can he improve at the final measure as he makes his way to the line? He does improve, but it's not enough to change place. He's P6 at 30.113 as he heads on to one more lap here. 30 seconds to go. Well, some drivers are leaving it very late if they're going to deliver. What about Abrams' teammate McKenzie? Can McKenzie get himself further up the order here in qualifying as he heads into the carousel and heading on through that long right-hander, trying to keep that nose tight to the apex, and as he exits out here, about to head to the line. McKenzie currently P9. Will they see him jump up the order at all? And he jumps up to P7. He's just behind his teammate. That's a critical lap at the final measure. Meanwhile, we've got more drivers coming on through, and I don't think they're going to be taken off of their current laps, as we do see Swirydowicz here heading on through the final corner. Shepka just behind him. When Swirydowicz crosses the line, he does not improve. What about Shepka? And Shepka goes up to P2 there on what is a 29.75. So Shepka, who has not necessarily been the strongest in qualifying, well, today, out of all the major runners in this series, in terms of drivers who have been there since day one, Shepka right now on fire. As we see Shink heading on around here, we see Aaron Lahr has just jumped up to P10, P9 in class as he heads across the timeline. We've still got one or two more laps to go. I do believe Dom Savio's out there on the lap, although this is looking as though it's been an aborted lap. Anybody else to come on through? I think we are all said and done, unless I'm mistaken, and that means that, well, Swirydowicz has taken pole position, and on the front row alongside him for the first time this season will be Matt Shepka in the Honda Civic Type R, and it will be Shink who takes P3 ahead of James Carr on the second row. Meanwhile, in the Delta class, all of our Delta drivers are in. It is going to be a Gus Blondell who has taken his maiden pole position alongside what is Connor Acitello in terms of when they're both in attendance, and he's got a sizable gap to the rest of the Delta field. Gus Blondell P9, then Dom Savio, the next driver, P14. This is a huge subversion of expectations here today, or at least my personal expectations from the run of form that we've seen all season, but we love to see it. It means it's only going to create an ever more unpredictable race at Mid-Ohio, but that is qualifying, ladies and gentlemen, and now we get ready to go racing any moment now. But as we do wait for that transition over to the formation of the grid here, it's a nice sunny day at Mid-Ohio with a little bit of cloud coming on over, which means track temperature will get relatively high, and we could potentially see the tyre degradation rate a little bit higher than drivers anticipated. But we do have relatively pleasant conditions, so it's not as though it's going to be absolutely taxing our drivers in terms of we're not looking at any absurd track temperatures compared to what it could be. And well, as we continue to wait here for that transition over to the formation of the grid, I think that is about to come, and we'll walk you down through the grid very shortly. As our drivers get ready to line up on the grid for round number 11, let's take you through how they line up for the race at Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course in what is our penultimate Alpha round of the season in Season 5 of the AlphaTouring Challenge. It is Wojciech Swirydowicz who takes pole position by a margin of 4.5 tenths from Matt Shepka from Torque Steer Racing, who lines up P2. Behind them on row number 2 is Francois Shink from Beaver Buzz Energy, who is joined by Breakfast for Dinner's Justin Rhodes. We then have James Carr, who starts off our third row, with Robert Abrams alongside Championship leader in P6, challenger in P3. How will it go down between them? Logan McKenzie, the teammate of Robert Abrams, starts P7 with David Bauer alongside in P8. We then have a Gus Blondell, the pole sitter in the Delta class P9, joined by Aaron Lahr on the 5th row there from Torque Steer Racing. Then John Lauzon and Kirk and Demir make up row number 6. Behind them on row number 7, Daniel Smith and Dom Savio line up together P13, P14, with Eric Statzer and Daniel Sedino behind on row number 8. Then Connor Achatella, in his weakest qualifying performance of the season, starts P17 on our 9th row, joined by Micah Hendricks, who was not able to make it in qualifying. And then we have Spencer Cockayne starting last but not least in P19 at the back of the grid. But we are hearing that a number of drivers may not be making it to the grid, as I'm to understand it, as we only have got 40 seconds left before we're meant to go racing. And well, Swirydowicz has not made his way to the front of the grid yet. We've also got James Carr and Aaron Lahr currently not on the grid. So could we see potential drama here before we even go racing? We've only got 30 seconds, but the field is lining on up, and as we look down, we do have some gaps in the field that are hopefully going to be filled before it's too late. But as we continue to look down, it's just Aaron Lahr and Swirydowicz who've yet to make their way to the grid. 15 seconds to go. We can see Mike Hendricks and Spencer Cockayne at the back of the field, and Connor Achatella as well, clipping in and out with a bit of connectivity issues. But as the clock continues to count down, Aaron Lahr's made his way to the grid, and Swirydowicz is not taken to the grid. It's Shepka on pole then, and now we await the lights. And it's lights out and away we go. 4 of our drivers in round number 11 at Mid-Ohio as they charge up towards turn number 1. And Shepka leads the field into the opening corner. Behind, Shink immediately goes on the offensive to cover off Justin Rhodes. As further behind, Aaron Lahr side by side with Robert Abrams. And Abrams with a slow start there in the Veloster. Side by side with Aaron Lahr, who's really gone on the offensive here in the run to turn number 2. Now as they head up towards the keyhole here, you can see Abrams on the left-hand side of your picture. Lahr on the outside trying to go all the way round. He's going to get out broken into the corner. And James Carr now under pressure. They make their way through turn number 2, and well, James Carr may be wondering twice here what's going on his inside, and that is a very fast and angry little Veloster that wants to gain the places back they lost off the launch. But as they head through turn number 3 through the kink, you can see now as they head down the straight how the Elantra just has so much more speed, particularly when it's also got the draft of a driver in front. And well, Abrams having to cover off the inside versus Aaron Lahr and trying to go on the offensive. There's contact there between himself and what is James Carr. And well, Robert Abrams had a bit of early contact, and James Carr falling down the field and rejoined. Oh, can it be? And James Carr could not have rejoined in a worse place in terms of where everyone's trying to come through. And it is madness through the madness further down the field as the majority of our Delta drivers have been sent off circuit. Statzer and behind Dom Savio as well. And I believe that was a Gus Blondell being caught up. He was the first driver to be clipped by what is James Carr. And well, that means starting from effectively almost the back of the class, he's now jumped up towards the front of it. Connor Achatella now leads the Delta class there with one stroke of blind luck, as meanwhile Gus Blondell's had to jump to the pits on that contact with what was James Carr. But as they make their way down through the carousel, we look to the leaders here as they cross the line, and after one lap it is Matt Shepka who leads ahead of Francois Shink in P2, Justin Rhodes P3, being chased by Logan McKenzie in P4. We then had David Bauer behind in P5 there, putting pressure on Logan McKenzie, who's had another brilliant start. Behind them Robert Abrams P6, Aaron Lahr P7, followed by John Lauzon in P8. But we look to the front of the field here, as you can see that Francois Shink already taking a look up the inside versus Shepka in the run to 2, and Shepka goes a little bit deep into the keyhole, but not enough to intimidate him as they come out to the corner and now head their way down towards turn number 4. Meanwhile, behind we've got in P8 John Lauzon ahead of Kirk and Demir P9. Then we have Connor Achatella, your Delta leader, P10, followed by Daniel Smith there in P11, Daniel Sedino in P12, and then we've got Mike Hendricks P13 ahead of Spencer Cockayne, and then Dom Savio, the last star drivers in the lead lap field as everyone else is in the pits. And well, speaking of being in the pits, that is James Carr, also Blondell and Statzer, and we've just heard that Swirydowicz has left the pit lane. He started this race on pit lane a lap down effectively. He wasn't able to make it to the grid due to technical issues with the car after qualifying, and that's very unfortunate for the pole sitter, but he's going to head on out and see how much time he can regain. As Shepka goes a bit deep out of 8 into 9, they charge, and Francois Shink up the inside there for the lead of this race, and this is critical for Shink, but Shepka's not letting this go as they battle side by side through 10 and up into 11. Now Shepka will have the run here through turn 11, but can he close the door into the carousel? I don't think so. Shink holds his nose on the inside into the carousel, and Shink gets on through. Now look at this. Logan McKenzie takes the apex of the carousel, squeezes his way on the inside of Justin Rhodes, and as they head out of turn number 13 and head on to another lap, McKenzie is through. And to be fair to McKenzie, he has shown time and time again ever since Imola that whilst he may not have the pace in qualifying, he has definitely got the guts and the glory in the races to deliver, and he's delivered another spectacular pass. As we see there a flash of lights from Shink flashing with Eric Statzer, who's a lap down after the damage picked up on what was lap number 1 for Statzer, and as they make the way through turn number 2, Logan McKenzie right now will be looking at this and thinking, can he go hunting after the win? And to be fair, if he can take the win, I can imagine his teammate Robert Abrams will say thank you very much, given the fact that Yellow Flag Motorsports has started to fall a little bit back towards the clutches of other teams in the Teams Championship. And on top of that as well, Yellow Flag Motorsports in the form of Robert Abrams is under major pressure at the moment in the Drivers' Championship. Abrams there on the inside defending versus David Bauer, and well, David Bauer's one of those drivers who would love to take the place off of Robert Abrams in terms of taking that place to the top 5. He's got Aaron Lahr for company, and as Lahr follows him through, the Talksteer Racing driver really trying to put the pressure on. You can see Lau's on behind, and then Gherkin Demir, the third of the Talksteer Racing drivers inside this top 9, making their way through turn number 9 at the moment, with Daniel Smith a bit further back for the team as they head on through towards the latter portion of the lap. But as they head up towards the carousel once again, with Shink making that early move, I think that's a critical move for Shink in the big picture. But the question will be, is it going to be one that's race defined, as we see a bit of a lock up there further back, and indeed it's 3 wide here as they come through turn number 13, 4 wide as they make their way into the start finish straight, and surely they're not going to go into turn number 1 4 wide. No, they settle their differences, and John Lauzon gains 4 places as he heads through turn number 1. My goodness, the man is absolutely possessed as they charge up towards 2. But look at Robert Abrams here, and Abrams is not letting this go as they go heavy onto the brakes into turn number 2, and as they charge onto the anchors, Abrams defends here for P4, and coming on out of the corner now, Lauzon will find himself in a vulnerable position as we ride on board with David Bauer as he heads up towards turn number 4. As they make the way in the long charge here, all the way through the right-hand king, it's going to be a big question of whether David Bauer can get the move done or not, or whether he's just got to play defensive as they head into the braking zone. Of course, he's got Justin Rhodes behind his teammate, and the 2 teammates won't want to take too much off of one another at this point in the race, given the fact they want to work together. But also, as you can see, that Abrams goes a little bit deep, and Abrams just does not look happy with the balance of that Veloster at the moment. Going through the madness time and time again, the car just seems to be stepping out on him as they make the way through turn number 8 and into 9. But rolling the way through the long right and down into the valley they go. You can see also how Abrams is causing a split in the field here with his difficulty in terms of maintaining that pace. The top 3 are breaking away, and then P4 through to P9 are all clustering together as they head out of 11 and down towards 12. But as we look back to the exterior cameras, we can see that Achatella continuing to gain ground as he slides his way into turn number 12. Well, the brake bias isn't towards the rear of that car, and I don't know where it is, because that is a sign of the brake bias being very far back in the car. When the rear slides like that, you can tell those rear brakes are really being made to do work, as we're in that Eric Statzer has had to jump to the pits due to going off track quite recently and picking up major damage to the car. But as they head through turn number 1 and on to another lap, things are starting to settle down in terms of the top 10, and we look to Daniel Steno here from Blue Flag Motorsports, who after a bit of a troubled start, indeed all of our Delta class minus Achatella having a really troubled start after that instant at what was turns 4 through to 6, where we saw the whole Delta field being impacted by James Carr going off and having to rejoin at perhaps the most inopportune moment. And again, not pushed in blame to James Carr, just calling it as we saw it on the cameras. Daniel Sedino is now chasing after Hendricks, Mike Hendricks, who started from the back of the field, and Hendricks continues to gain ground, and the Blue Flag Motorsports driving the 473 car, well, he may have started at the back. You can imagine by the end of it, he will not want to be anywhere near the back. He'll want to be right at the front. And in terms of his pace, he's lapping right now quite strongly in terms of overall pace, and is matching all the way out to the top 5. But as he heads through what is turn at number 6 and in soon shortly, the Blue Flag Motorsports driver here will know that catching is one thing, passing is another thing entirely at any circuit we've visited this season. But indeed, at this circuit, we have seen just the propensity for battling side by side through each and every corner. But speaking of battling, we look to John Lauzon here, who's actually battling his way up through the field. Indeed, only moments ago, making a huge campaign for 4 places through turns 12 through to 1, getting 3 of them ticked off, and one of them eluded him in the form of P4 off of Robert Abrams. But as they head across the timeline now, the Beaver Buzz driver from Canada looking to try and get a little bit closer. You can see that David Bauer by comparison, falling back a little bit as they head through turn 1 and up towards turn 2. But at this point in the race, now that we're 8 minutes in, we've had all the initial battles calm down a little bit. We do sometimes start to see drivers move into a bit more of a 90% mode. And what we mean by that is, you can imagine as a driver, if you do your own sim racing or you're driving your own car, you may feel as though at some point you're at 100% of your energy. So you're trying to go as fast as humanly possible, and therefore you're really maxing it out in terms of the car. But in the 60-minute race, where we've got a mandatory pit stop for fuel, and therefore it's the case you cannot go all the way in fuel, you must take some fuel at some point in the race, then you start to think about fuel saving. You start to back the car, if you do a little bit of lift and coasting, perhaps some short shifting as well. And we may be seeing that from the breakfast of dinner driver David Bauer, as well as perhaps a little bit of a struggle through some of the corners compared to his teammate Justin Rhodes. And I think Justin Rhodes at this point may be on the radio to the team principal asking, can we potentially switch the positions, because Gurkan Demir is getting closer and closer each and every lap turn, and the Talkstick Racing driver from Turkey in the 913 car, he could potentially really make this work to assist his teammates further up the road, particularly Shepka, for example, in making sure that breakfast and dinner have only got one driver who's able to push up. If he can get himself ahead of one of them, he can split the pair as they make the way up towards turn 12. But no change at the moment, but we are seemingly seeing some drivers back the wick down a little bit versus some drivers who will continue to press on. But speaking of pushing, well, Abrams again under pressure as we ride on board the gearbox of the yellow flag Motorsports Velocity as it heads up towards turn number 1. Looking back at John Lauzon there as he tries to look for this P4 for Abrams. Abrams understeering a little bit wide initially, but you can see just the rotation in the Veloster compared to the Elantra. He's able to go deep into turn 1 but still make the corner comfortably, and that's one of the underlying strengths of the Veloster is the fact it's got very strong handling characteristics. It's not got that strong handling characteristics when Lauzon takes a look up the inside. Not to any avail at the moment, but Abrams wide, and as they head down through 2 and down towards turn number 4 through the kink of relay charge, you can see Lauzon inching closer and closer here as the straight line speed of the Elantra is unmasked and heading into the braking zone. Well, it's of course a switchback coming up. It's a right into left. Abrams is going to try and hang it around the outside. Lauzon up the inside. They're going as late as possible. Abrams keeping on the inside into turn 5. He's not giving this up. He's going to make Lauzon really have to work the car to get this done. And Lauzon has to back out again because the way the apex of turn 6 tapers, you can't really go too wide there unless you've got your nose ahead initially on that inside. And Lauzon backs out quite sensibly there to avoid taking all the pace out of the cars and leaving himself vulnerable to David Bauer. But Bauer's going to go for the move as they head through turn number 9. A bit of contact between the two of them, elbows out, and the breakfast dinner driver here is now trying to come on through. And of course we saw plenty of moments between breakfast dinner and Beaver Buzz Energy last time on Mosport, and it's happening again as they head into turn 12, and Lauzon with a little bit of oversteer off of the curb at turn 11. The car gets unsettled and heads back down the order, as meanwhile we can hear that Daniel Smith's had an off track into the wall there. You briefly saw it, he's got it wrong, and now Achatella's on the offensive. Well, in fact he's under pressure, and Micah Hendricks has gone on the offensive and come on through. Meanwhile, whilst all this has been going on, looking a bit further back up to that battle for P4, P5. Look at this between Gurkan Demir and Justin Rhodes. Demir got ahead only moments ago in the run to turn 1, but now Rhodes has got back ahead. I think Demir's had a bit of a slowdown accredited to, I think, for track limits at turn 1, running a bit wide and gaining time because he did lift off there to let Justin Rhodes back on through. But drama for Daniel Smith, who went straight on at turn number 12. I'm not sure if there was contact with another driver, but Smith into the wall and has had to jump to the pit. So a number of drivers not having a fortunate day at Mid-Ohio, but those who are having a fortunate day are continuing to enjoy the battling all the same. Well, we talk to fortunate drivers here, and it is the case that Francois Shink is currently leading the field, and he is opening up an advantage versus Matt Shepka, who's in P2, and Shepka under pressure here from Logan McKenzie, who I think really wants to try and come on through, and the simple reason for that is that McKenzie needs to chase down Shink for the purposes of his teammate. If they really want to stop Shink from trying to gain the championship lead after today, then McKenzie's got to get ahead and put pressure on Shink, because right now Shink is being given breathing room to either fuel save or open up a massive lead. And well, whilst a couple of seconds doesn't sound huge in the relative scale of things in this series, 5 seconds lead going into the pit is the equivalent to having a pit stop advantage, almost, in terms of the fact that not too much fuel has to go in these cars, and therefore it works out in the favour of the driver who's got that advantage considered. It gives them so many more options. But then again, we're not 100% sure on what the fuel attrition rate is here at Mid-Ohio. We've seen in some rounds that it's been very high, in other rounds it's almost just been a quick splash and dash and there you're done. But as our drivers head up in towards turn number 2, Logan McKenzie having to wait and watch. He's just not got the momentum this time as they exit the keyhole and head down towards turn 4. But meanwhile, speaking of momentum, there's Mike Hendricks going around the outside of Aaron Lahr, the Torque Steer Racing driver in all green, coming out of turn 2, but now it's a drag race between the two Hyundais. You've got the Veloster on the outside, you've got the Elantra on the inside. They make the way down towards turn number 4, side by side they charge, and as they head into the right-hander at turn number 4, who's going to find the way on top? Well, Aaron Lahr's going to defend hard, but Mike Hendricks will be stronger on the brakes here as they head into the braking zone, and in the end Hendricks smoothly sails around the outside and covers it off to turn number 5. Hendricks gains another place as they head through towards turn number 6. But with all this battling and Mike Hendricks gradually making his way up through the field, having started from the back, the big question will be, how long will it be before Hendricks gets into the fight for P4? As we look at that fight, you can see that Robert Abrams has been given some breathing room with David Bauer getting ahead of John Lawson. In fact, those lap times now from Robert Abrams are stabilising for him. He's now lapping in the high 30s, and this is the pace he needs to be able to keep the rest of the field behind us. We're here. Gus Blondell's just had an off track and has had to jump to the pits. It has not gone well for him at all after a brilliant qualifying session, but you can see as we look behind Abrams and look at Bauer in particular, after getting ahead of Lawson is right there in his slipstream, and as they make the way into turn number 1, well, I think the challenge will be for David Bauer. Can he hold on to that position, or does he want to hold that position? But also speaking of holding positions here, Matt Shepka continues to frustrate and hold Logan McKinsey at bay, but McKinsey definitely is salivating at trying to make that move at some point as they head through turn number 2 and down towards 3-4. But this is the big quandary, of course. Do you stay, or do you try to keep a driver behind you and therefore essentially lose pace to the guys in front, and in return guarantee yourself potential track position later in the race, or do you let it go? And I think right now John Lawson is getting a very stern message from David Bauer, which is, I'm not letting you take this P5 back, whatever you say, because I think David Bauer feels as though John Lawson's got a lot of pace and he'll just disappear off up the road. And you can see Lawson literally sniffing the rear end of Bauer's car left, right and centre as they head into the right-hander at turn number 6. Justin Rhodes is just watching on at the moment. I think what Rhodes is getting ready to do is pounce should there be an incident between his teammate and also Lawson in front, and he may try and get involved when Lawson tries to make the push for the pass. But as they head through turn number 9 and back down into the valley, no change as it currently stands, and we ride on board here with the Beaver Buzz Energy driver as he heads up into turn number 11. As they head through the left-hander and now down into the carousel, they drop. You can see also this difference in body language of the cars. Lawson taking a much more aggressive run into turn number 12, really pointing the car towards apex. Meanwhile, Bauer taking a much earlier braking point and just gradually bringing the car to the corner. I think Bauer's trying to protect the car a little bit. We do know that the Elantra suffers in the 60-minute alpha races with regards to its tyre degradation as we go deeper and deeper into the race compared to its peers. And I think what Bauer might be trying to do here is frustrate Lawson, getting to overuse the compound a bit more, and that means that later in the race he just does not have the pace compared to his peers, which may be a very sensible thing for Bauer to do. If he can frustrate the driver behind him long enough, then that gives Rhodes more opportunities later on, because right now Justin Rhodes is cruising at the pace of the two in front of him, but he's not putting pressure on Lawson in terms of being all over his rear view mirror. And as they head down towards turn number 4, this time you can see John Lawson close, but not close enough as he heads all the way out towards top gear and now onto the anchors he goes into turn 4. But as they make the way up through the madness, we can see just a bit further back Mike Hendricks has closed up to the back of Gherkin Demir, taking a little peek up the inside there into turn number 5. A little sniff of a move, but not trying to force the move as we get that long distance camera shot. That gives you a whole perspective of the undulations of turns 4 through to 7 as they now head off into the distance. And it just goes to show you as well how this circuit has really been built into the Ohio landscape as they make the way through turn 9 and down into the valley. Charge on past our cameraman here, heading into turn number 11 very shortly, and Hendricks not close enough to make an effective pass at this time, but waiting in the wings. Should Demir make a single mistake, he'll be there and waiting. But speaking of waiting, they were going to have to wait for some time, 3 of our drivers, after early incidents today, because we do have 3 retirements on the board, and those 3 drivers are Gus Blondell, Daniel Smith and Eric Statz. Are very unfortunate for all 3. The retirement for Blondell being from that second incident after a disruptive lap number 1. It is the case that in his second incident they've had to retire the car, they're not able to get it repaired. Eric Statz, after that initial off, had a second incident as well, which put him effectively what was 4 to 5 laps down. They decided to retire the car, but meanwhile, speaking of not retiring, then Mike Hendricks is not retiring his tenacity, but more so as we look up to the battle for P2 and suspend the fault there regarding Hendricks, as we see McKinsey up the inside of Shepka in the run out of 2 through 3. And I think Shepka at this point, knowing the Civic Type R just does not have the legs compared to the Elantra end as they head in towards turn number 4, and as they roll the way in towards 5 now, I think McKinsey will be able to take the fight to Shink, given the pace that McKinsey's been showing, and keeping in mind And the McKinsey, if it were not for running behind Shepka and being quite close in the last couple of laps, I think his lap times would have been matching Shink's. He's only been a couple of attempts off, and that's not to discredit Shepka, to be fair. Shepka's been working hard and pushing those laps on through, but I think McKinsey just has a little bit more in the car at this point in the race. But we do know that the Honda has the stronger tyre wear rate as we go deeper into the race in these 60-minute races, so do not count Shepka out. He could be a force to contend with as we go beyond the pit stop, where that tyre advantage will start to become more prevalent for the Honda driver as they make the way to the end of this lap. But as they head to the line, that is 12 laps turned already in race conditions and still plenty more to go. Looking further back, we can see Hendricks on the inside, in fact on the outside I should say, versus Gurk and Demir as they make the way out towards turn one. Demir tries to get the run, he's going to cover it off, or is he? No, he backs out into one and Hendricks comes on through there. Hendricks setting up the move, a few corners back, getting the exit out of the carousel to go side by side through turn 13. And moving up into P8 now as they make the way in towards turn number 2. And as they charge all the way out towards the keyhole, we can see that Hendricks now has the task of finding his way past Justin Rhodes. And if we know anything about the breakfast for dinner drivers, including Rhodes, they are very effective defensive drivers. They know how to make that Elantra incredibly wide. And I think when they see Hendricks is coming, they're not just going to simply let him coast on through. It is going to be a dogged and determined fight. But as they head up towards turn number 4, elsewhere in the field, we do have Swirydowicz, who is currently a lap down in P16, but he is lapping the fastest of everybody, continually lapping in the 29s. And oh how if the Polishman had been able to get the car onto the grid. Unfortunately, the team had issues. They reported, and therefore they couldn't make the grid start. They haven't started from the pit lane, a lap down eventually. Now back out on circuit, they'd be ruining what could have been today. But whilst they head on around here and try to gain places at the misfortune of others, and by just delivering absolutely phenomenal pace, we do look all the way back up to what is P5, and in particular David Bauer for breakfast, and then the American in the 35 car trying to keep Lauzon at bay, and Lauzon just staying there attached to the back of the B4D machine as Lauzon decides to go into the pits. And this is an early pit stop from Lauzon. Now as he makes his way on in, this is surely to go for the undercut, but is this the right call? I think Lauzon is playing a gamble here, which is that he will be able to push once he leaves the pit lane, but in return he is definitely going to have a car that will be worse for wear in the latter half of the race, particularly in the final 10 minutes. Now we look to our circuit map and you can see in fact as Lauzon is currently parked in the pit lane, he's greyed out there on the start finish line, but he's got a lot of space to play with as he exits the pit lane. He's going to be coming out of the effectively what is P13, and he won't have anybody near him apart from Spencer Cockayne, or in fact no, it's not Spencer Cockayne coming on through right now, that is our P16 driver of Swirydowicz, and John Lauzon has come out in clear air. Here is John Lauzon in the Beaver Buzz Energy machine, and now all he's got to do is deliver these laps as if it's a qualifying session. If he does so, he could jump up ahead of what is David Bauer into that P5 position when the pit stops are all said and done. If he doesn't nail this, however, he could end up losing out of just fitting back in where he came into the pit at the end of the previous lap. As he makes his way through the kink of 3, we'll keep an eye on his lap times to see if he starts pumping in some very strong times, and that's a sign of what's coming. As he makes his way into turn number 4, we look from our P13 drive back to our race leader, another Beaver Buzz Energy driver, Francois Shink, and as he comes through turn 12 and into 13, you can see that gap continue to open up as he heads to the timeline. As Shink crosses the line, what's it going to be this time around? Well, that lap was a 30.3. Logan McKenzie, a 30.0, and a personal best for the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver, Shepka, a 30.181. So I think this switch of places worked out to the mutual benefit of both drivers, given that before the place switch was made, we saw that their pace was averaging around the 30.4s, but now McKenzie definitely starting to turn it up to 11 here and pushing on after Shink, and Shepka in return trying to follow in the draft, and this is working out for the pair of them. Now is Shink just simply balancing the pace? Is he matching his pace to the drivers behind them? Whilst McKenzie will have gained on that lap by 3/10, you can imagine on the next lap you could potentially see Shink try to go 3/10 faster than his previous lap in order to counterweight the pace that's being shown by McKenzie. Shink, of course, with a 3-second advantage, has that space to play with. Speaking of space to play with, Hendricks on the inside there versus what is Rhodes into turn number 4. He tried to open up the door there, but Rhodes said no and instead kept him at bay. But Micah Hendricks, will to be fair, there's one thing we count on the 473 driver to deliver. It is those nice attacking moves, and that was a great attempt, but he wasn't close enough, but he looks up the inside into turn number 9, and again not able to do so, but I think that was more of a feint to the inside there to try and get Rhodes to throw the steering open, thinking, goodness me, there's a Veloster coming up my inside, but Rhodes not reacting to it. They're digging deep, and well, as they head through turn number 11 and down towards 12, now Rhodes will have the big question, which is, can he get the exit he needs in order to keep Hendricks at bay? None of them peeling into the pits. John Lauzon, of course, our only driver who's come into the pits for his scheduled stop so far, and as Hendricks exit out of the final corner behind Rhodes and heads into turn number 1, 23 minutes are cleared. We've still got 37 on the clock. I can't do maths today, it would seem. And as they head through turn number 1 and up towards 2, 37 minutes on the clock. There's still plenty of racing to go, and Hendricks right now is trying to deliver a P6. He looks up the inside into the keyhole, but he can't find it again. He has to wait, and well, as he's made to wait, you can imagine that Rhodes right now maybe starting to sweat a little bit, because he has Hendricks behind him who's putting a lot of pressure down on him. But as they head down the straight here towards turn number 4, at the head of this trio, that's David Bauer in P5 and the breakfast for dinner driver, feeling comfortable as it currently stands. But I think the challenge for David Bauer is how long will he feel this comfortable before the pressure starts to build on him once more. We're rolling the way in towards turn number 5 and heading across and down towards turn number 6. We can see a bit further behind Gherkin Demir also closing up, and it does seem as though right now David Bauer and Justin Rhodes are becoming a bit of a cork in the bottle as they make the way in towards turns 8 and 9 shortly, and the Torque Steer Racing driving the 913 machine also getting within arm's reach of this battle, this four-way battle that is building for P5, or is it effectively P6 given the undercut being attempted by John Lauzon? Well, that's the question. We'll have to wait to see when it's answered. I suspect we'll know the answer within the next 16 minutes, because we normally do clear all the pit stops by the 40-minute complete mark. But as our drivers head on around, will any of them peel into the pits this time? No, they do not. And as we look to the blimp camera here, a wonderful distant perspective, and they make the way down towards turn and number 1, or up towards it based on your relative camera position. You can see how as the drivers make their way through the long left-hander here. A bit further back, that's Aaron Lart also closing up, and Connor Achatella also within earshot of the racing ahead as they make the way down towards turn number 2. In the long run they charge, and as they head in towards the corner, Hendricks continues to be kept at bay, but for how long before he starts to consider pushing a bit harder and potentially sending it into other corners here with those open entry points? Well, I would say if Hendricks is not able to get the move done within the next 5 minutes, he's either going to consider getting close and trying to push for the move, alternatively he may head to the pits and try to undercut for position, because right now it does not seem to be going the way he wants it to, which is to gain another place as quickly as possible. But you can see how close he gets there in the run into 5, and as they make the way down through 6, well, I think it's David Bauer at the front of this pack who is really now starting to trigger that whole pace of the group in terms of set the pace, and everyone else is having to react to it. Meanwhile, speaking of reacting, was there a reaction from Francois Shink versus Logan McKenzie? Well, that last time around, no, there was not. Logan McKenzie was still 1.5 tenths faster, and as he exits out to turns 12 and 13, taking a bit of the grass down the apex curve of turn 12. Interesting enough for Shink, he crossed the line of 30.05. That is a personal best from Shink. What about McKenzie? Meanwhile, a 30.101. So Shink does respond. Meanwhile, Shepka sets another personal best of 29.992. Well, Shepka is definitely enjoying being pulled along in the draft of McKenzie's car, for as they make the way out towards turn number 2, Shepka is now flying. Now, I'm not saying he's going to go for the move immediately versus McKenzie, but what you would imagine is, given this pace, that Shepka is looking to come back a bit later on and look for that P2, and Robert Abrams a bit further back in the pitch there in P4, and a bit of a lonely P4. Well, he's been given some breathing room from David Bauer, given the way Bauer seems to be now holding up the rest of the field behind, and the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver at this point, I think, will be taking this P4 with open arms in terms of the relative peace and quiet he's being gifted. But as they head up towards turn 4, we've had Daniel Sodino into the pit. He came on him from what was at the time P11, and now he's making his way out of the pit, so he's the first of our deltas to come in for their scheduled stop, and we're still waiting for the majority of the stops to come as we look to David Bowden right on board the gearbox here of our P5 driver from breakfast for dinner, who is continuing to keep Rhodes, Hendricks and also Demir at bay, and Aaron Lart is almost within reach of this battle. As you can see, again Hendricks takes a peek to the inside into turn 9, but he knows he can't go for it because he forced his nose into that space. It would see both drivers coming together, and the stewards will be wagging a finger at that, there's no doubt about that. but as they head in towards turn number 12 once more, the question is, for how long will they stay like this? Surely one of them has got to take the gamble soon of peeling into the pits and throw caution to the wind on an undercut, but none of them this time as they head out to turn 13 and up towards the next lap. But across the line they charge and into the long left-hander at 1. And as they make the way, and you can see a difference here in approach to turn number 1. David Bauer deciding to go quite late into the corner, whereas Rhodes responding to the dirty air off the back of his teammate's car and deciding to go in a little bit earlier, pointing the car towards the apex to try and offset that dirty air. But as they head into turn number 2, again the same thing. Rhodes is very smart in terms of the way he's placing the car on corner entry, and also by pointing the car at the corner apex. What he does indirectly is he chops off the space that Hendricks has to play with. He tries to go for a move in terms of the fact that he won't have as much space to try and dive to the inside. So it's a double purpose here from Rhodes. He's counteracting the dirty air for Bauer's car and also making sure that Hendricks knows he's going to have to go for the move. He's going to have to go for it with a huge pace advantage coming out of a particular corner, and here it comes as he switches inside. There's contact between the two of them. He can't find his way on through, but Hendricks there taking another little snipe to the inside of Justin Rhodes through turn number 5, and you can feel the frustrations bubbling here from Hendricks. He's got so much pace available to him, but he's just not got any room to be able to unleash that pace right now. He's being held at bay like a tiger in a cage, and as he heads up towards turn number 12, well, he's got to get a move on soon, because otherwise I think Gurkan Demir will be thinking about this, rubbing his hands together and thinking how he can get into the fight as they head up towards turn number 12 again. But look at Hendricks sliding the car on the inside of the braking line in towards turn 12. And that just goes to show you that, as we talked about earlier, the carousel's got no defined racing line. You can pretty much take any approach to the carousel and make a line out of it. And Hendricks, they're going all in on the inside to see Rhodes go quite deep by contrast as they make the way on to what for them is lap number 20. Well, they're almost at the halfway point as they head up towards turn 2. Aaron Law a bit further back, and you can also see Connor Achatella there in the rear of the picture, the leading Delta driver at the moment, inside the top 10 in P10 overall. And as he heads in towards turn number 2, a bit further back there is Dom Savio, who after a difficult start is now really regaining ground. And for Dom Savio, he is matching the pace of Achatella, but not closing up. They are trading lap times here, both trading in the mid-30s, and as they make the way down the back straight towards turn number 4, you can imagine for Dom Savio, he'll be hoping that he can just make this P2 count and there's no more drama, but at the same time, if he's able to gain that win off of Achatella, I think he would take that as a huge scout, given the pace that Achatella has shown all season. But as he heads down towards turn number 4, it's a bit quiet outside the top 10, but well inside the top 10 again. We come back to the loud roar of the touring car machines. They head in towards turn number 8, and this is the battle for P5 you're watching. Barra ahead of Rhodes, Hendricks followed by Demir, and as they make the way through turn number 9, no change. These guys have been literally glued to one another for the best part of the last 10 laps, but anyway, if there is a slight mistake, if there is a slight error or off track from any one of these drivers, fireworks are going to launch. And well, you can see that Hendricks again looking for the launch into turn 12. He can't find it, and that time Rhodes covered it off a bit more aggressively. He put the car there, broke it a lot earlier and brought the car to apex, but Aaron Lahr has responded to this. He has decided to come on in dead on the halfway mark of the race at 30 minutes complete, and I think this will benefit him in the long run. Meanwhile, oh goodness me, and what's happening there? We've got two drivers around, and that's David Bauer and Gurkan Demir. They have both gone around. Now, I think David Bauer, in fact, lost the rear of the car coming out of turn number 1. Now, whether he lost it through his own impetus, alternatively a bit of contact, we're not 100% sure, but what that means is Justin Rhodes and Micah Hendricks have both come on through. We can't see any damage on the front of Justin Rhodes' car, so I think David Bauer may have just lost the rear, and in the process, Gurkan Demir has come on through, made contact with the way with David Bauer, and it's all gone wrong for the pair of them as they both had to jump to the pits. But that has gone from what was a 4-car train now to only 2 left standing, and Aaron Lahr at this point may have just been updated on what's happened and thinking to himself, why did I pit given the fact I was closing up to these guys? And well, for Aaron Lahr, I think still it was the right thing to do, because he may, with Hendricks closing up to the back of Justin Rhodes again, if Rhodes cannot break away from the Hendricks and Hendricks continues to fight him, then Aaron Lahr may gain that 2 seconds that he was behind him before he went into the pits, and he may gain that through their battling and get ahead of them just based on strategy, which would be a huge achievement. But we'll have to wait and see as they make the way in towards the carousel. Now, will we see either Hendricks or Rhodes coming this time? No, they both stay on out. And speaking of staying out, we look to our leader of Francois Shink, and he continues to stay out there. But that last lap losing half a second to Logan McKenzie. As we see there, Shepka goes a bit wide. Well, Shepka almost losing the car and taking a cone with him for good measure. You can see it underneath the car there, and that's going to hurt him in the run down towards turn number 2. Hopefully he can dislodge that cone from underneath the car, because that is not going to help at all with regards to the air of the car, and particularly it will really be felt down the straight here as he tries to punch his way through the air. But finally, I think he's popped the cone out from underneath the car, and as they make the way through 3 and 4, that was not going to be a comfortable feeling for Shepka for some time. And in fact, you can see there with that slight off and also the cone dragging him down, he has lost the best part of what is a second to McKenzie, and now Logan McKenzie will have quite a bit of space to operate in terms of chasing down Shink and not having to worry about pitting too early or too late versus Shepka. But as they make the way up through the madness and up towards turn number 9, we look a little bit further back here to championship leader Robert Abrams, who is inching closer and closer, little by little, to the top 3. He's matching on pace for the most part, but in terms of his pace relative to Shink, he is closing. As we're hearing that Spencer Cockayne has had to jump to the pits due to an incident. We've had quite a high rate of attrition here today, given 19 drivers took to the grid, or were meant to take to the grid. Already one driver was not able to make it to the grid, and that's Swirydowicz, who has made his way around circuit. Indeed, is out racing. But Gurkan Demir, Spencer Cockayne and David Bout all in the pit lane at the moment, having their cars worked on. Auguste Blondel, Daniel Smith and also Eric Statzer are 3 retirements early on in proceedings. But as time ticks on, we look from Robert Abrams to the battle for P5, and you can see that Justin Rhodes under pressure as they make the way on to the next lap. We ride on board with Micah Hendricks into turn number 1, and as they head through the long left, we can see how Abrams up the road has just done a personal best in P4, but these two are not matching their personal best. Both of them right now half a second off their personal best. A 30.5 for Rhodes last time out. Mike Hendricks a 30.44, but the problem is I think Hendricks has got low 30s in this car. I think he can probably do a 30.1 or a 30.2, but he's just not got the room to be able to deliver it. And well, whilst he's not being held up as much behind Rhodes compared to when David Bow was ahead of the pair, still I think Hendricks is feeling the pinch of running behind that Elantra, and the thing that's keeping Rhodes comfortably ahead is his abilities to just be able to use the Elantra's speed on the straights. But look at this placement for Rhodes. He knows that Hendricks is trying to find the inside through turn number 5, and he immediately covers it off time and time again, and Hendricks has got nowhere to go given the amount of speed he's trying to take out of the car in order to go for the move. He gets a strong run into 8, but again he's so close to the back of Rhodes. In fact, he locks up under braking there, I think trying to avoid the contact from the back of Rhodes, and as they make their way through 9 and into 10, Hendricks has fallen back a little bit, but this shows you how much commitment he's put into the cause in terms of trying to get into the top 5. But with all this happening, the big question is, what about John Lauzon? Now you can see him down the time tower, he's in P9. As we see it, there's Rhodes going into the pits, and well, I think Rhodes has nailed this perfectly, but the problem for Justin Rhodes is, what about John Lauzon? Well, here is Lauzon, and I can tell that Lauzon's pace over the last few laps has been the low 30s. I think Lauzon is going to jump ahead of all of this, given the early undercut, and then he will be vulnerable at the end of the race, but he may have a sizable advantage before he becomes vulnerable. As he makes his way through turn 12 and into 13. Rhodes is in his pit box. I look outside my commentary box window and Lauzon heading across the timeline and heading up towards 1. That's a 29.964 there for John Lauzon, matching almost his personal best. Justin Rhodes leaves the pit lane, and that is the difference, ladies and gentlemen. That is what the undercut has done for John Lauzon. It has given him a gap of over 5 seconds, if not more, versus John Lauzon, who makes his way into turn number 2. And Lauzon right now, I think there's going to be a grin creeping onto his face, because he will know that when the drivers in front of him pit, i.e. the top 7 pit, he will be jumping ahead by default of Dom Savio and Connor Achatella, but he will also be jumping ahead of Micah Hendricks, and at the rate he's pushing, there's no reason to think that John Lauzon could not be hunting down Robert Abrams in the late stage of this race. But this strategy is working out well for him. He does, of course, have the spectre hanging over him of what happens at the end of the race, given the fact he's doing a second stint on these tyres that's a very long stint. And whilst these tyres well down naturally, of course, the longer you spend on the tyre compound, the more thermal energy you're putting through that tyre over an extended period of time, and he's not going to have as much cool down in the tyre compared to the other drivers who've had the ability to split the race into two or make it a lopsided race in terms of pitting early. Speaking of pitting, here is Robert Abrams, the yellow flag motorsport driver, comes on in the number 14 car, and well, Achatella goes on through to take a place. Of course, he's yet to pit. The same for Dom Savio, but where is John Lauzon versus Robert Abrams? This is going to be critical, of course, because if Lauzon can get out ahead of Abrams, he can help out his teammate in the championship, and I think this is going to happen. Lauzon comes on through, Abrams has just left his pit box, and there's the difference. Lauzon jumps ahead of Robert Abrams, and this is a shock drama twist in terms of the racing, and Justin Rhodes just behind, and this is not the way that Abrams will want it to go at all, and Justin Rhodes will now see in front of him is Robert Abrams, and Lauzon has jumped another place. Lauzon is flying. Those laps are pointing another 29.9 from John Lauzon that last time around. Well, Justin Rhodes at this point has now got to react because the pressure is on, given the fact that his teammates are a long way down with that incident at turn number 1 moments ago. And Rhodes at this point, I think that battle with Hendricks has just cost him pretty much any opportunity here to go hunting after the podium and potentially a top 5, unless he can bring down that delta to Abrams. But the gap is 2.5 seconds, and as they make the way into the madness, we can see up front Francois Shink leading, comes into the pits here to take his stop. Logan McKenzie stays out to lead lap of this race to get a bonus point, and I think Shepka was hoping that McKenzie would come on in now. Can he go even further than McKenzie in this opening stint? We have seen drivers do that in these feature races in terms of going incredibly long to get that bonus point, but Shink is pitting. Micah Hendricks also into the pits. What about Connor Achatella? Has he coming in? Well, we have seen Connor Achatella just go through the picture, but Dom Savio comes on in from P6 at the time, and we will believe he's going to be released. But here comes John Lauzon. Francois Shink's already leaving the pits, so I think Shink's going to be safe from his teammate. What about Hendricks? Well, we see that Hendricks has left his pit box, and John Lauzon comes roaring on through to take P5. Lauzon gains another place. What about Robert Abrams? Well, he comes on through and jumps ahead of Hendricks, and Hendricks, despite it all, comes back out behind Justin Rhodes. Well, he'll be absolutely foaming at the mouth at that one, and I can tell you, not in a good way. The Vorsen 3 driver right now, he would have thought he's got it done by running long, but instead he's come back out behind Justin Rhodes, and he's got it all to do on track. But as they come out of turn 2 and down the long straight towards turn number 4 they go, John Lauzon is the man of the moment here. He's up to P5 and effectively now behind Francois Shink, his teammate and race leader of 6.5 seconds is the gap between the two of them. And where will McKenzie and Shepka fit into all of this? Now, surely it's not going to be the case that Lauzon is going to jump ahead of McKenzie. Given McKenzie's just making his way into the pit lane right now, you would imagine they're going to come out ahead. But I'm not 100% sure about this, to be fair. With the pace that Lauzon is showing, I think he could put a huge dent in the proceedings of both McKenzie and Shepka, or be hot on their heels as they come into the pits here. McKenzie already been so. Shepka makes his way into his box, and Achatella comes on in. They can't go any further, and as they make the way to their boxes, where's Shink? Well, here comes Francois Shink as we see Swirydowicz come into the pits for his scheduled stop. Now Shink will come on through to retake the lead of this race, although McKenzie's already leaving his pit box. It's a very near the exit pit box as well, and as they make the way on through, well, there's McKenzie coming out ahead of Shepka. Shepka leaving his pit box in the pit lane, and here comes John Lauzon. Well, this is how much John Lauzon has jumped up through the undercut. He's now got himself into P4. It's not quite close enough to be in attacking distance of P3 immediately, but he's cut the gap to the top 3 down to only 2.5 seconds as he makes his way into turn number 2. Now, if Lauzon can nail the next couple of laps while Shepka and McKenzie are trying to get their tyres back up to temperature, it'll take them 1 to 2 laps to get back in the flow. You could imagine that Lauzon right now could be a danger to the pair and potentially really help his teammate out here in the late stages of the race. I think Shink's got enough in hand to be able to hold on to lead, although the gap is only 1.9 seconds as they make the way into the second half of this lap. So Shink is not safe as it stands, but I think the Beaver's energy drive, once he finds his rhythm, will have more than enough in the tank in order to be able to keep McKenzie and Shepka at bay, but it's whether Lauzon can start to interfere. Meanwhile, further back in that battle for P6, Mike Hendricks still finds himself cramped up behind Justin Rhodes, and Rhodes at this point is playing this absolutely perfectly to frustrate Hendricks in this battle for P6, and I think both of these two know now this is a battle purely for this position. I think Rhodes is committing to that battle, Meanwhile, I would imagine that Micah Hendricks wants the top 5 finish here, but that top 5 is only 2 seconds up the road in the form of Robert Abrams. But to get to Abrams, Mike Hendricks has got to find his way past Justin Rhodes, and that is a lot easier said than done, as Francois Shink delivers a personal best of the race of 30.038. Meanwhile, McKenzie on his outlap, putting in a strong outlap. In fact, one of the strongest outlaps that we've seen. The same for Shepka, not as strong of Lauzon's outlap, to be fair. And as our tries come on through, you can see a bit further up the road. That is, I believe, Abrams getting on through. Although we do briefly lose there Justin Rhodes. It was the case, just a little bit of disconnection in terms of latency, but hopefully that does not spell a sign of what's to come in terms of potential engine blow. But look at Hendricks here, late on the brakes, into the keyhole, and as they come on through, well, Hendricks saw the door was open and said, right, this is it, I'm going for it. And as they make the way down towards turn number 4, it's going to be a battle side by side as they make the way through the long right of 3 and up towards the braking zone. You can see here Hendricks trying to squeeze Rhodes as much as possible, but he can't squeeze him any more than that. Oh, as they'll both be going off circuit. Rhodes looks to come on the inside. Now, can Hendricks outbrake Rhodes to hold the inside into 5? I think he can, and I think Hendricks has got this done, but how long does it take as we see a love tap there to the back of Hendricks' car from Rhodes? I think that's Rhodes saying, okay, you got me, fair enough. But as they come out to turn number 6 into 7, they charge and down towards 8 and 9. Hendricks has had to work that one time and time again, and he's finally made it count. But has it come too late? That is the big question for Mike Hendricks. I think it has come too late for him to go hunting after a podium, given the pace he has at his fingertips. But Robert Abrams now will be thinking, oh goodness me, it's no longer the breakfast for dinner driver behind. Instead, it's a fast charger in the form of what is Micah Hendricks, and the gap between the two of them is only 3 seconds as it stands. And Abrams now will have to go hammer and tongs all in here to hold on to this P5, because he's not catching up to Lauzon at this time. Instead, it is the case that he will need to balance those laps out versus Hendricks and Rhodes to be found that last lap, gaining half a second with their battling. But we'll have to wait to see on the next lap, should Rhodes not come back at Hendricks, whether Hendricks can come on through and try and contest that P5. Well, you could see there Rhodes taking a little bit of a return peak to the inside of turn 2, nowhere near close enough, just trying to get into the head of Hendricks to try and make Hendricks outbreak himself into the corner. But there's one thing you can guarantee: when Hendricks is on fire, he does not make mistakes, and we saw that at Fuji Speedway back in round number 3, how he came to the grid and absolutely delivered in the Veloster. As he heads up towards turn number 4, Hendricks really now digging in and trying to go hunting after a top 5 finish here, having started from the back of the field. But as he makes his way into turn number 5, how much more ground can he gain in the remaining 16 minutes plus the final lap? In front of him, he does have David Bauer, who is a lap down, and therefore will be expected to respect the blue flags when they do start getting waved for him. He's only 1 second, 1.1 seconds to be precise, ahead of Hendricks as they come through turn number 9. But you can imagine those blue flags will be coming soon, and then he'll have to move aside. But as they make the way up towards turn number 12, we look to race leader Francois Shink as he comes to timing line. And as he crosses the line, that lap from Francois Shink was a 30.15 versus McKinsey on a 29.97, Shepka on a 30.01, and John Lauzon on a 30.2. Something tells me that I think Lauzon is now starting to hit the cliff a little bit with regards to his undercut strategy, and is starting to have to reel the pace in a little bit, whereas Shepka and McKinsey are only starting to really open it up, and Shink is matching the pace of McKinsey and Shepka at the moment. That gap between McKinsey and Shink is gradually being whittled down little by little. It's going to be close come the finish, and the thing for McKinsey here, the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver in P2, is if he can keep up this momentum and get within a second of Shink in the next couple of laps, he will be in the draft, and he will benefit from that ever more in the run from turn 2 to turn 4, and also on the start finish straight to a lesser degree. But McKinsey is really having to try and extract every lap in order to get close enough here. Shink is not giving this one up easily, and we can imagine for the Beaver Buzz Energy driver, if he takes this win here today based on the current positions, he will take the championship lead with 2 rounds to go, when we also consider potential drop scores, and that is a huge place to be given next week at the Glen, Watkins Glen International. It is of course going to be our final Alpha round, where we've got major points up for grabs, and then we've got the season finale at Road Atlanta in the special round, where the points are the same as in our Alpha rounds, but of course it's a different style of race, and that may be a race that favours Shink, it may favour Abrams, it may favour neither of them, or favour them equally. But as Shink crosses the line, he takes another personal best of 30.0, but McKinsey shaves another half of a tenth out of him. That was a 29.9 29.61. It is now one of those situations where every lap, every hundredth, every thousandth is like gold dust, and if they can find it, they need to take it. Meanwhile, Shepka behind in P3. That last lap of 30.7. Meanwhile, John Lauzon, well, how the man is doing it. He must be absolutely on fire right now. The Beaverbuzz Energy driving the 77 machine, a 29.75 on this second stint. So late into the stint, given he pitted after 18 minutes. He is absolutely on a charge, and he is going for that final step of the podium after Shepka as they head into turn number 4. But the thing for Shepka, of course, in one of his season at best performances, if not his season best, he will not give this in. You can see there's a bit of contact between the two of them as they come through turn number 5, as they head into the right hand of what is turn 6. Shepka goes a little bit deep through 6, but covers off 7 and makes Lauzon go the long way round the houses, but Shepka goes deep at 8, and Lauzon is through into P3, and will Shepka out of sorts there, but I think again may also be looking to try and tuck in behind and capitalise it. Perhaps he's respecting the fact that Lauzon's got a bit more pace at this point and wants to use that to get close to McKinsey, but surely now it's going to be the case that with 5 seconds between Lauzon and McKinsey and with only 13 minutes to go, there's no way. But hold up, Shepka's into the pits. What on earth is happening for the Talksteer Racing driver? Surely this is not a drive-through penalty. It can't be the case. He's hit his limit already, but as he makes his way on down, we'll have to wait and see. But this is a late drama for the Talksteer Racing driver, who was doing so well. And will he be pulling into his pit box? No, it is a drive-through penalty, and I wonder if that little bit of contact with Lauzon has potentially sent him over the instant count limit. Well, Shepka comes back out. That was a drive-through, and he returns in P7, just ahead of Achatella behind. Achatella moving out the way there for Swirydowicz as they head up towards turn number 2. Swirydowicz, of course, still a lap down on the majority of the field, but picking his way on through. And as they head through turn number 2 here, Achatella comfortably running in P8 and leading the Delta class. Daniel Cedino in P2 as we see him making his way out of turn 1 and up towards turn number 2. The Blue Flag Motorsports driver doing very well here today despite it all, and is lapping consistently, not quite on the pace of Achatella, who is a second a lap faster at this point in the race, but still Daniel Cedino putting those laps together and holding on to second place in the Delta class, P10 overall as it currently stands, and he'll be very pleased with that, one of his season best performances in an Alpha round. But looking from a driver who right now does not have too much to do other than bring it home to a driver who's got everything to do to try and break away and hunt down Robert Abrams. This is Micah Hendricks, the Blue Flag Motorsports driver, who since passing Justin Rhodes has not broken away from Rhodes. Rhodes is still right there behind Hendricks, and I think Hendricks has had to take so much out of the car to make that move. The car may be in a very limited space in terms of the pace it's actually got left. Although I say that, we see Robert Abrams going a bit deep there at turn number 12 and having to bring the car back together. But it does look as though the Velocity drivers here started to struggle late on in the race, and perhaps they've both just taken a bit too much out of the car in the early stages, because we saw Abrams really having to defend hard on the first 3 laps to hold on to top 5 positioning. Hendricks, meanwhile, has had to come through the field and had his ultimate challenge. As we see there, Justin Rhodes almost losing it, like his teammate David Bauer coming out of turn 1 did much earlier in the race. You can see David Bauer behind a lap down now, but Rhodes almost having the rear step out on him by taking to the grass on the exit of 1. Just one tyre going wide, and that's a lot sometimes, as we saw for both Bauer and also Gurkin Demir got caught up in that. But as they head down towards turn number 4, the big question is Shink versus McKinsey. Who's going to come out on top as they make the way through 5 and down towards 6? Well, Shink at this time is 1 second ahead, 1.2 to be precise, and here is Shink being closed up, I should say, by McKinsey little by little. And that last lap, again, McKinsey took 3 attempts out of Shink. He is stripping that advantage away, but every time one of them even makes a tiny little error, and when I say tiny, you won't see it on camera, but they will have missed their acceleration point by, say, 1/10 of a second, and it cost them 0.1 of a mile out to the next corner. That is how close it is, and as they head on through, that gap could stabilise, it could open back up, it could come down even further. And let's see this time as they come to a line. Well, from Francois Shink, that was a 30.05, from McKinsey a 30.06. The gap holds this time around, but it's 1.1 seconds as they go on to another lap. They charge through 1 and down towards 2, and as they head in the long run up towards the keyhole, they've got some traffic coming up 4 seconds up the road. Gurkin Demir in P13 and Dom Savio a further 15 seconds up the road, so I think they'll only catch Gurkin Demir between now and the end of the race. Meanwhile, looking back to the battle for P4, well, Robert Abrams on that last lap of 30.25, Micah Hendricks of 29.9, then Justin Rhodes of 30.2. I think Hendricks feels as though P4 is on here. I don't He's going to get after John Lauzon. Lauzon is lapping in the mid-30s at the moment, so his pace is now starting to fall to a standstill. But to be fair, I think now he's broken up into P3. You can see him briefly off into the distance there on the distant camera. I think for Lauzon, he's not going to have to worry too much as they make the way in the run to turn number 4. And as they head into the sweep through turns 4 to 8, we can see how Hendricks still gunning on, trying to just get a little bit more of that gap down to Abrams. He's going to be in the tow now on the straights, and that's going to help keep him safe versus Rhodes is staying with him. But as they head through turns 6 and 7, and now off camera in towards turns 8 and 9, they head through the double right and into the valley after 9. But we can see how Hendricks really putting that pressure on and trying to gain one more place. And that will make it for him at 14 places gained if he can pull off that P4. 13 places if he can't. And to be fair, that's the most gained of anybody. I think he will take the most overtakes in this round award. There's no doubt about that. But as he heads through turn number 12, he wants every place he can. And indeed, a little accolade, a bonus point, and indeed, well, our little trophies to go with it is all Hendricks is going for at this point. And give credit to the man where it's due. He is really pushing on to show him. Time and time again, it's not how you start the race, it's about how you finish. Needs to look to end on a high. 8 minutes still on the clock, and as he heads all the way down towards turn number 2, we also look from him to a bit further down the order, and in particular to Swirydowicz, who's chased an after David Barron. This is a position for P14, Barron in the foreground, and then Swirydowicz behind him there in the orange, white and black liveried Hyundai Elantra. And as the privateer makes his way out of turn number 2 and down the back straight towards turn 4, he'll be closing up here in the draft. But as they head on down, we do have to cut away from them because the gap between Shink and McKenzie is now below a second. It's 9 tenths as they made the way into the sweepers of turns 4 through to 7, and as they make the way through 8 and 9 shortly, that gap is continuing to go one way, and McKenzie is pushing on here as we ride on board with the yellow flag motorsports driver. Now as they head through the valley and up towards the carousel, McKenzie will now be feeling the benefits of the draft on the straights, but also feeling the disadvantages through the corners. So dirty air, that warm wafting air from the back of the Elantra in front of him is going to give him understeering, because it may also hurt those front temperatures, particularly on both the tyres and also engine temperature, as he heads up towards turn number 1. And as he makes his way in the charge onto another lap, they go into the long left-hander. You can see the difference of line. McKenzie taking a lot of apex curve, and in fact riding that apex curve and mounting it, unsettling the car quite heavily compared to Shink, who's able to take a much more comfortable line. And as they head up into 2, not long left. If McKenzie's going to get this done, he's not got long to get close enough to start contemplating a move here. He needs to be within half a second within the next lap. If he's not, by the end of the next lap, which is lap number 37, then I think the move may be off. But meanwhile, looking from here is Micah Hendricks in another championship dynamic defining move. If he can find his way past Robert Abrams, this will cause further damage to Robert Abrams' championship lead, and indeed will more likely subvert his advantage and lead to Francois Shink taking the lead, even if McKenzie finds his way on through. But we'll have to wait to see as they head down towards turn number 4. Onto the brakes they go, and as they do, you can see Hendricks' car squirming down to braking, and that shows you how aggressive onto the brakes he's going and how real with that bias is, because the rear is stepping out of its own accord. And for Hendricks now, he's got to be careful, because if he pushes it too hard at this point, it could all fall apart at the last moment. But as we ride on board here with Robert Abrams looking back from the gearbox of his car, we can see in the runs at turn number 9, Hendricks not close enough to look for a move. And of course, Hendricks now has a different dynamic. Of course, both drivers running different setups on the car, but they will know that these cars run the same in terms of potential top speed and everything in between. They'll handle similarly as well. So therefore, Abrams now with an equal machinery. Now he's got to do it all as the driver rather than in terms of being able to use the advantages of his car. And as they head through 12 and into 13, you can see Abrams under a lot of pressure here as they head on to another lap. Well, Hendricks is close. Does he look for the move into 1? He considers it. He backs out there. I think sensible, looking to get the run up towards 2 instead. Abrams there a little bit out of sorts on the run into the braking zone. But as they exit and head up towards the keyhole here, you can see Hendricks look into the outside. Abrams covering off the centre of the road. Hendricks dummies back to the inside here. Does he go in on the brakes? No, he does not. Abrams is able to outbrake him, but does he go a bit too far on the brakes? There's contact between the two of them, and as they make their way out of turn number 2, it's a brief tap, and now it's a race down towards turn number 4. Abrams on the outside, Hendricks on the inside, but Hendricks is falling back a little bit. Abrams covers him off, and Hendricks tucks back in as they make the way in towards turn number 4. Abrams covers off the inside here, and as they make the way into the right-hander, Hendricks is going to try and go all the way around the outside. Now, we've seen this from Hendricks time and time again. He forces the move, and as he comes into turn 5, Hendricks on the inside, Abrams around the outside. There's contact between them. They head into 6, and as they roll the way through the right-hander, Hendricks goes all the way round, side by side through 7, over the crest, and down. Can Abrams keep his nose in? There's more contact between us. We see there Hendricks slides a little bit wide. It's a small tap, and they're still side by side coming out turn 9, but in the end, Hendricks gets them through, and that is critical in the championship in this late stage. Hendricks moves up to P4, and I think that's everything Abrams has been able to throw at it as they head down in towards the carousel. Now, can Abrams come on back? Meanwhile, continuing the battle between Shink and McKenzie. McKenzie, since getting within 8 tenths, has not closed up recently. There's only 3.5 minutes to go, and as they make the way up towards turn number 1, Hendricks holding firm and continuing to press on as they make the way through the long left-hander. John Lauzon, meanwhile, up the road. Well, you won't have to worry about this as they head up into turn 2. And rolling the way into that braking zone now. Abrams looking very comfortable at this point, but for him, I think the yellow flag motorsports driver now, he's got to worry about Justin Rhodes getting too close and potentially looking for that move, and it's not going in the right direction at a very late stage in this race. Meanwhile, to give you an update on the battle for the lead, here it is on camera. You can see that Francois Shink is still holding on by 7 tenths of a second versus Logan McKenzie, and Logan McKenzie being in that hot dirty air off of the back of Francois Shink's car as they make the way down into turn number 8 and 9. I do not think McKenzie's got an answer to the dirty air. He just cannot seem to get closer. You can see that gap is holding around the 7 to 8 tenths mark. The only thing they could potentially hope, well, Gurkhan pulls out the way for both. I was going to say hope that perhaps some traffic intervenes unfavourably for Shink. Of course, you hope that, but you don't want it to happen that way. But when you've got nothing else to turn to, you'll take every advantage you get. But McKenzie right now, 8 tenths off. I just don't think there's that final 10% to get him within the half a second he needs to really go on the attack as he makes his way into turn number 1. 2 minutes on the clock, 2 more laps to go based on time and a bit of mental mass. And as they head through turn 1 and up to his 2, McKenzie in the dirty air runs wide. I think it's just hitting the front end of the car too hard. It may be a bridge too far this late in the race. John Lauzon, meanwhile, off in the distant camera, enjoying that P3 comfortably. But Mike Hendricks is continuing to charge as he almost loses the rear coming out of turn number 1. Well, Hendricks here, despite getting P4, he's not had enough here. What is going to sate the appetite of the man? I think the only thing that sates his appetite is winning. And if he had more time, he'd continue to go hunting after it. But he doesn't care whether there's a minute remaining or a whole hour remaining. He's giving it everything he's got and also trying to break away from Abrams. And now Justin Rhodes is very close as we ride on board with the P6 trying to head for breakfast or dinner as he looks at that potential move. Up into turn number 4, he sides the inside, then to the outside, looking all around here as they go onto the brakes, but Abrams covers him off well, parks the car in the middle of the road and says to Rhodes, no, I'm too savvy for that one, I'm afraid. And as they make the way through turn number 5, that you can see Rhodes trying to hang around the outside, but the Elantra just not having that front end grip anymore, and instead facing a wall of understeer on that front end of the car as they head through the left hand at turn 6 and down into 7. Well, in fact, the left hander of 7 into 8, I should say, and as they roll the way into turn number 9, Rhodes staying right there behind Abrams. But the thing is, he's just not able to find the move, and they've only got one more lap. But speaking of one more lap to come, we go on to that final lap. Francois Shink leads, the white flag is waving, and behind him Logan McKenzie, 7.5 tenths off, just cannot get any closer. Meanwhile, Lauzon into the pits, and John Lauzon in a late change of fate here as he run out of fuel. As it turns in the case, it's a drive-through, which either way it goes, that means Hendricks is up into P4, and Robert Abrams is back into what is P4 as they head into left-hander, and as they make the way up towards turn number 2, I think Lauzon is just, in fact, it is a quick splash and dash for John Lauzon. It literally is a park and go, and that is absolutely horrific right at the end as a drive when you've nailed it perfectly and it all goes wrong. You just haven't got the fuel for one more lap. That's so unfortunate for the Beaver Buzz driver, but what it means, it opens up this final step on the podium. Well, Mike Hendricks, I think, is safe, to be fair, as we hit the hour mark. This will be the final lap turned under race conditions, but Robert Abrams here in this P4 now, he needs that P4. He needs it so much to keep him well in that hunt for that championship lead. To be fair, we believe it's going to swap, not by much going into the final 2 rounds, but every point is critical, and he will not want Shink to take a major advantage into the Glen before the season finale, but as they make the way through turns 5 and 6 and up into 7 they go. I think Abrams is safe. He's looking comfortable as he makes his way down through 8 and into 9, and I can't see Rhodes coming on through. But speaking of coming on through, as he makes his way through the penultimate corner, it has been a masterfully executed race, and as he comes out the final corner, Beaver Buzz Energy's Francois Shink takes the win here at Mid-Ohio ahead of Logan McKenzie P2. Micah Hendricks will come on home shortly to take P3 as he heads through the final corner here, and what has been a drive from the back of the field, 15 places gained to take the final step of the overall podium, and also what is the Alpha podium. Robert Abrams P4 ahead of Justin Rhodes P5. Matt Shepka in the end, having started on the effective pole, takes home P6 ahead of Connor Achatella, who returns to winning ways on his return after a brief hiatus in P7 there in the Delta class. John Lauzon P8 missing out by a single lap what could have been a brilliant podium in the drive of the race, there's no doubt about that. Aaron Lahr P9, Daniel Zadino comes on through shortly to take what will be P10 for the Blue Flag Motorsports driver. And P2 in the Delta class as he comes to the line, shaking from side to side, happy with that one. And then it will be James Carr who comes on through, best of the rest in P11, ahead of Dom Savio a little bit later on. In fact, Dom Savio quite a way back at the moment as he makes his way through what is there, the valley, and up towards turns 12 and 13 shortly. And Dom Savio will be the last driver to finish on the lead lap, and quite fitting that he will be the final driver to take to the podium of the Delta class in P3 in the Delta class, P12 overall, as he heads on through the final corner here to complete his race. But as he crosses the line, we take a look at those race results, of course subject to any stewards inquiries, and they are as follows. As we look to the overall results then, we can see that after 60 minutes of racing here at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Racing Course in the state of Ohio in the United States of America in round 11 of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5, Francois Shink taking the win in the end by 8/10 of a second over Logan McKenzie in what was a dogged and determined fight from both drivers from start to finish. And whilst McKenzie had the pace, he just could not extract it in that dirty air in the final 5 minutes to close the gap and put the true fight on for the win. But still, credit to both drivers, a brilliant battle that built up to a crescendo. Micah Hendricks P3 there in a deserved P3, fighting his way all the way out from the back of the field. Then Robert Abrams P4, and then Justin Rhodes P5 to complete the top 5. Matt Shepka P6, a difficult day for the Talksteer Racing driver, but still plenty of positives to take away, particularly that qualifying lap, which set him up very well, and whilst it didn't quite work out in its entirety, still a great result. Connor Achatella P7 there, your Delta winner, ahead of John Lauzon P8, Aaron Lahr P9, Daniel Zadino P10, and then best of the rest, James Carr in P11. As we take a look at the individual class results, we can see there Francois Shink taking that win ahead of Logan McKenzie and Micah Hendricks, ahead of Robert Abrams and Justin Rhodes, Shepka P6, John Lauzon at P7, then Aaron Lahr, James Carr and Gherkensmeer completing the Alpha Top 10, with Wojciech Swirydowicz in P11, and then David Bauer in P12 there, ahead of Daniel Smith with that sole retirement. And then we take a look at what is the Delta class by comparison, and we can see that Connor Achatella there, P1, a win by a comfortable margin of 23 seconds ahead of Daniel Zadino, Dom Savio P3, Spencer Cockayne in the end having that retirement but classified as P4, Auguste Blondel with that very early retirement P5, and Eric Statzer with the earliest retirement in all of our races in last but not least P6 there, and P19 overall classified. But of course the big question that you guys and girls at home will be asking is, how does this potentially shake up the Drivers' Championship standings? Well, let's show you how those standings now look after 11 rounds. Well, you can see in first through to 10th, these of course being the overall standings, but we'll point out where our Delta drivers fit into the mix. Francois Shink now takes the championship lead by 10 points. This is the first time in a very long time we have seen the lead drop out of Robert Abrams' hands, and what a time for it to occur with only 2 rounds remaining. Now, of course, it's only 10 points. It could swing back in the next round, but it's a critical juncture, and you can see the top 2 are respectively 190 points ahead of John Lauzon there in P3. Lauzon has jumped back into P3 ahead of Logan McKenzie, but the gap between the two of them, with Lauzon losing out on that P3 today, is now only 6 points, and McKenzie will literally do everything, there's no doubt about it, to take that P3 back before the season finale. James Carr in P5, falling a little bit behind John Lauzon and McKenzie, but at the same time, a contender there alongside his teammate David Bauer, who's in P6 on 401 points. We have got a 4-way fight for P3 as it currently stands, with Lauzon through to Bauer separated by 35 points. Then Micah Hendricks in P7 on 366, 22 clear of Jerome Bajulas, with Conor Achatella, your Delta Championship leader in P9 on 335 points, jumping ahead of Shepka now into P9 by a single point, Shepka in P10, and then outside the top 10, Gherkin's out on 275 points, best of the rest in both the regard of being in P11, but also there on 275 points, a sizable gap between himself and the top 10. Aaron Larnett, too far behind in P12, ahead of Justin Rhodes, Daniel Smith, and then Daniel Sedino there with a great result today, now into P15 on 206 points and starting to break away from Auguste Blondel and also Giovanni Romano and Eric Statzer. Behind them, we have Adrian Fedorowski and Fernando Takahashi, and following our top 20, looking outside our top 20, we can see Wojciech Swirydowicz in where's P21 there on 87 points. Not picking up a major points haul today, but still delivering despite the technical issues in what was the build-up to the race. Dom Serio on joint 87 points, but behind based on result count back in P22. 10 points clear of Paul Mikolajczyk. And then we do have Travis Hoare, Jesse Burdos, Wiley Cox, Spencer Cockayne, Corey Fluke, Michael McLeod, and Alex Jensen completing the top 30. And then coming to our P31 through to P40, we can see Jermaine Warren ahead of Jorge Zuniga, Casey Nimitz, Jonathan Stroll, Scotty Lunn, Brandon Veers, Sean Gurd, Joe Calmieri, Andrew Trickett and Steve Hansel complete our standings of 40 drivers. Now, I am just checking to see where we do have an update on the team standings points as it currently stands. Unfortunately, we do not, ladies and gentlemen. We do hope to give you an update on the team's championship before we head into the season finale, but that's not available today. But as soon as we do have it, we will bring it to you in the broadcast, most likely next time around now. But with that, it is now time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed the show today and you've enjoyed the race in action and you want to know more about the AlphaTouring Challenge, the ATC, then you can do one of two things. Firstly, you can always check out our website, that is alphatouringchallenge.wordpress.com, or if you're more of a Discord user and you want to go straight to the source and the beating heart of where all the organisation happens, speak to the drivers, speak to the organisers, perhaps you're sat there right now thinking, I love touring car racing, I can't compete in Season 5 because it's so close to the end, but I want to be on that grid for Season 6, then head to the Discord invite link available on screen, and therefore get yourself signed up, because it's the case we're always looking for new drivers, whether you're a rookie or a shiny pro, it doesn't matter which one you are, sign up and get on that grid for Season 6 because we'd love to see you there. But indeed, speaking of seeing things here and there, our drivers will be making their way to Watkins Glen International for round number 12, the penultimate round. The racing will occur tomorrow on Monday the 3rd of October, but we'll be bringing you all the racing action as if it were live on Saturday the 8th of October, and well, at the Glen, of course, the revival place of road racing in the United States of America after the Second World War. Could it be the revival of fortunes for Robert Abrams in the overall and the Alpha Championship right at the end, or has Francois Shink turned the stone far enough that he's going to break away? That will be the big question we need to answer next time out in the state of New York, and you will not want to miss it. Make sure you join us there. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. We have been the AlphaTouring Challenge. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.